Hello everyone. Today I'll begin with the poem In Memory of W.B. Yeats by W.H.Auden. And as usual, before beginning with the explanation of the poem and its analysis, I would give you a brief introduction of Auden and his poem In Memory of W.B. Yeats. W.H.Auden was born in 1907 in England and died in 1973. Educated at Oxford, Auden is well known for being the leading poet of the 30s along with Stephen Spender, C. Day Lewis and Louis MacNeice. Later, Auden moved to America. Auden supported himself through writing and periods of teaching. His early poetry was predominantly Marxist, whereas his later poetry reflects a strong Christian position. This transition from a radical to a conservative position, though surprising, is in some ways understandable, for both in their own way gave him a sense of commitment. Auden's views poetry as a serious game which should lead to increased self-awareness on part of the reader. There is a degree of unevenness in his work, perhaps because of his own shifting self-analysis and public postures, and also partly because of the wide range of his interests. He was an English-born American poet and was the one of the most active of the group of young English poets who in the late 1920s and early 1930s brought new techniques and attributes to English poetry. The Great Depression that shook America in 1929 hit England soon after. Auden and his contemporaries saw not a metaphorical wasteland of Eliot, but a more literal wasteland of poverty, industrial stagnation, and mass unemployment. Now coming to his poem In Memory of W.B. Yeats. When Auden wrote In Memory of W.B. Yeats in February 1939, Europe was on the verge of World War II. Now, Auden's poem breaks the mold of traditional elegies and chooses to not just lament the death of Yeats or list out cherished memories, but covers the vast territory of the great poet's life and work, even venturing to criticize him. We find a sense of urgency in his poem, perhaps because the world war is imminent. There is almost something prophetic about Auden's observation that people, too logged in their own daily routines, fail to notice what is happening right next to them and will ignore the pain and sufferings of the others. Auden denies the political consequence of poetry, but admits that poetry can effectively portray the world and connect people, sharing the same problems, fears, and anxieties. Auden's poem points out that Yeats' work did not gain prominence by his political ambitions and socially oriented intentions, but rather by the depth and beauty of his verse. As well as being an elegy for the dead poet, In Memory of W.B. Yeats is also a meditation on the role and place of poetry in the modern world. In Memory of W.B. Yeats is in 3 parts, each of which has its own form and style. In the first section, Auden speaks about the death of the poet, and in the second is his personal and compassionate address to the poet and accepts the irreparable loss of the poet. In the final section, Auden sums up the great achievements of Yeats, although he had a lot of weaknesses. Time has forgiven him all his weaknesses and failures. Thus, In Memory of W.B. Yeats is quite different from all other elegies. We cannot see any artificial or labored in the grief of the poem as in the conventional pastoral elegies. That's all for the introduction of Auden and his poem In Memory of W.B. Yeats. Thank you.